Yeah, it is absolutely extraordinary, Karen, that we're talking about a US corruption case in a country such as Ukraine, because Volodymyr Zelensky, who is a brand new, shiny new young president here in Ukraine, he only got elected back in March and April and inaugurated just soon after that. He just won a parliamentary election this summer to shore up his base as well with his brand new party as well. He is fighting various issues here in this country, and one of the biggest issues blighting Ukraine is, yes, you guessed it, corruption. It is something that Vitaly Klitschko, the world-famous world champion boxer, once said to me back in 2014 when I first came here just after the Maidan, that he's fed up with his country being known for being the most corrupt country in Europe, perhaps on the planet as well. So you can see that actually a US corruption scandal and allegations being thrown around on both sides of the very partisan divide on this one as well is quite ironic that it should centre right here on Ukraine as well, because of the many issues that Ukraine has to sort out. It is the endemic top-down corruption that Volodymyr Zelensky was pretty much elected on to fight here as well. So the last thing he needs is to be dragged into this battle here as well. And it's the last thing, in many ways, that Ukraine needs as well, because, of course, as we know, a Cold War between Democrats and Republicans being fought here in Kiev as well is going on top of many other key issues for this country, including a real live hot war, potentially some would say, in the south and east of this country, with, of course, the many areas such as the Luhansk and Donbass region, which has pretty much got, of course, rebel control, Russian-backed rebel control. And, of course, everyone will remember back in 2014 as well, we had the annexation by Russia of Crimea, and that's another issue which Mr. Zelensky is trying to sort out. So he's got a whole host of enormous issues to sort out: domestic corruption, the relationship with Mr. Putin, which there were signs of a thawing quite recently with a prisoner exchange going on, and there were hopes that some form of, well, détente, if not rapprochement, could happen between Russia and Ukraine. So being dragged into this other issue, absolutely key. So why is this battle happening here in Ukraine as well, is what many are asking as well. And it goes way back in history. Perhaps we can even go back to the end of the Soviet era, of course, when Ukraine became a battleground between the West, the EU and the US, and indeed Russia for influence as well. And Russia was winning that right up until 2014, with Mr. Yanukovych seen by many here on the ground as a Russian puppet, as someone who led the corruption, who basically gutted the armed forces so that it couldn't defend itself as well, as graphically seen perhaps in that 2014 annexation. Thereafter, we saw a new president come in, Petro Poroshenko, who promised to sort out a whole host of issues, but needed US help as well. So on the ground here in Ukraine, I remember speaking to incredibly eminent US politicians, including famously John McCain, who was here pretty much on the barricades during the Euromaidan protests of February 2014 as well. And basically, a lot of US politicians saw this as a country where they could gain influence and, of course, push back the Russians and perhaps push forward a Western agenda. In terms of the current debate as well, it centres on many issues as well, and the role of Rudy Giuliani, who is the private counsel of the president, not an administration official, is looking like it's becoming key, because he's been making a lot of inquiries over the last year or so, inquiring perhaps on President Trump's part, is the accusation from the Democrats, rather than on the behalf of the US as well, about events in Ukraine regarding Paul Manafort and the release of documents which incriminated him. Of course, Mr. Manafort is serving in a federal prison at the moment after accusations which were, of course, proven about disclosures of payments in 2016 as well. So he's making inquiries about that and who were the whistleblowers on the Ukrainian side as well, trying to push the Zelensky government to give them some details there. But then the one which is proving more contentious as well is the Joe Biden story as well, because Hunter Biden, who is Joe Biden's son, was working from 2014 for a company called Burisma Holdings. Now, this was a state gas and oil company. Mr. Biden Jr. was being paid enormous amounts of money, up to £50,000 a month at one point, in order to be a director or a board member of that company as well. And this was at exactly the same time that Joe Biden himself made himself the point man for relations between the United States and Ukraine as well. So Joe Biden was pushing, again, back to that corruption corruption issue, for various things in this country in order for the West and for the US to push aid into this country to shore it up after the departure of Yanukovych and, of course, during the Petro Poroshenko presidency as well. And so many are saying, look, it just didn't look right, even if nothing was wrong in what Joe Biden was doing and what his son Hunter Biden was doing. And we must emphasize there is no proof whatsoever yet that either of them have done anything wrong in this country as well. Perhaps it was the impression that it gave that you had the vice president making himself very important here in Ukraine regarding various issues, and at the same time his son was working for such a key institution in the country as well. Now, what Joe Biden was trying to do, and ultimately was successful in doing, was getting rid of the prosecutor, Victor Shokin, who many people in the West, and it's not just Americans, thought was ineffective and was blocking the end of corruption in this country, blocking the battle against corruption as well. Eventually, Mr. Shokin did actually get sacked as well, but his replacement, Yuri Lutsenko, became another problem as well, because then he came under pressure potentially from those in the Trump camp to open up inquiries into Mr. Biden thereafter. So you can see there are many, many layers of this. Let me add another level as well. Marie Yovanovitch, who was the US ambassador following Jeffrey Pyatt, who was the man I spoke to many times over 2014 and 2015, she became the US ambassador, and she left her role a couple of months early this year. We understand under pressure from some within the Trump administration, because they see her as potentially part of that camp that was blocking inquiries into Joe Biden, was potentially also part of the whistleblowing of Paul Manafort and those financial disclosures. So you can see on many, many levels, this is absolutely tortuous. And I think we've got a whole web of connections on the wall that we're showing people as well. But there is another key point as well. And of course, the military aid and whether it was connected, whether there was a quid pro quo. Again, no evidence yet that the military aid being held back was so that President Trump could use leverage against the new president here in Ukraine. But the fact of the matter is, this country desperately needs that military aid, of course, $391 million going towards the reinvigoration and the retraining of a Ukrainian army, which, of course, has been battling to get itself back on track following, as I say, being gutted under the Yanukovych era as well. So many, many key issues here. But the point of the matter is, Mr. Zelensky just didn't need this as well. Again, he's very, very new. He's got some absolutely key issues for this country. And let me go through those again. Not just fighting corruption, rearming the country as well, trying to find some form of rapprochement with Russia as well, and also growing the economy as well. It's one of the poorest countries in Europe, and they want to improve their relations with the West as well, with NATO and with the EU, possibly with some form of NATO ascendancy in 2024 as well. So many, many layers on this one as well.
Hi, I'm Joanna Bersecci, and thank you for watching. You can check out more of our videos by clicking on the boxes on the screen. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more from CNBC International. Thank you for watching.